God of War Ragnorök builds upon the legacy of the God of War franchise and is one of the best games of the year. From start to finish, epic storytelling and gameplay combine to make an emotional and cinematic thrill ride. In this video, I'll break down what makes the game so special, how it pushes the boundaries of video game storytelling, and how this game will impact the games industry going forward. With that out of the way, let's jump right into it. Set in the world of Norse mythology and following the events of the last game, Kratos and Atreus are still living in their shack in the forest. After learning the truth of his lineage and his true name Loki, Atreus longs for adventure outside of the woods, eager to learn more about his prophesized role in Ragnarok, the destruction of gods in the impending apocalypse. After visits from Freya, Thor, and Odin seeking retribution for Kratos' killing of their kin in the last game, Kratos and Atreus' short-lived peace ends as the two are forced to flee. When learning that the Norse god of war Tyr might still be alive, they depart for Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves, to seek his help. What follows is an epic and sweeping adventure across the realms of Norse mythology, too dense and long to summarize here, and it's best to go into this game unspoiled. At its core, this game is a timeless father-son story, scaled up to epic proportions in the world of gods and monsters. Atreus yearns to discover himself in the world outside, while Kratos wants to protect him and forge him into a capable fighter. It's an immediately identifiable theme for gamers young and old, whether they're young men or fathers themselves. It's no easy feat to have players identify with overpowered gods and mythological figures, but the dev team managed to pull it off. This is the most intimate God of War has ever been, a far cry from the earlier games in the series. In terms of storytelling, Ragnorök pushes the boundaries of what is possible in the interactive medium of games, and delivers a jaw-dropping cinematic experience. It feels like a movie that's been shot in one take. The story never cuts away, save only for times you die. All cutscenes are rendered in-engine, meaning gameplay and story beats siege seamlessly into one another. As you'll be playing as two different characters, the perspective shift is pulled off in such a smooth and creative way. Further heightening the cinematic experience, the game feels like a movie shot with a handheld camera. During cutscenes, the camera dramatically pans between characters, tracks in and out, and perfectly simulates the movements of a handheld camera operator. As this game's storytelling techniques blurs the lines between cinema and games, and the dramatic script plus cinematic presentation gave me such a heightened emotional experience that no game has ever given me before. This is a new platinum standard for AAA game storytelling, and future games from any studio will have a hard time topping what's on display here. Kratos is back, older, wiser, more scowlier than ever. Like the last game, he spends this game grappling with how to raise his son and the conflict therein, keeping him safe, but also raising him into a capable fighter. In a career-best performance from his voice actor Christopher Judge, this is the most nuanced take on the character so far, as every facial expression and voice line reveals a more human side to the Spartan god of war. There's a scene in which, after a long section playing as Atreus, he confronts his son, and as soon as Kratos is on screen, you feel his presence immediately. And in Atreus' perspective, you feel small beneath this legacy character who we've shared this decade-spanning emotional adventure with. As for Atreus, he's older, more capable, and thankfully significantly less annoying than the last game. This is equally his game as it is Kratos's. He's growing up faster than his father would like, and this forms the central conflict of the game. He has some lengthy playable sections this time, and not knowing that going into the game, I let out an audible groan. I've been burned by action franchises introducing second playable characters before. Thankfully though, these turned out to be some standout chapters, and his distinctly different playstyle, which I'll cover in the gameplay section, and more importantly his vocal performance and writing. The character work Santa Monica Studio has done with Atreus is nothing short of incredible. A weaker, significantly less powerful character than the franchise's iconic badass main character could have been a total laughingstock, and many players thought that in the last game, but his arc is a sensitive wartime coming-of-age one, and all players will empathize with it. On the topic of supporting characters, familiar faces from God of War 2018 make their return. Returning as the main assistant character is Mimir, the severed head attached to Kratos' hip. Having an always-on-your-person supporting character who gives you directions and provides exposition is a tried-and-true trope of action-adventure games, but Mimir is certainly a memorable one, with a delightful Scottish accent, cheerful personality which counters Kratos' dour one, and the hilarious design of literally being a severed god's head stuck to Kratos' ass ensures he's a memorable take on the trope. Providing comic relief are Sindri and Brock, dwarves that act as shopkeepers and assistants on your your quest. Sindri's fastidious, hygiene-obsessed do-gooder personality contrasting with Brock's grouchy one is a cliché of comedy double acts. Yet transported into this epic universe of gods and war, they provide much-needed humour and brevity, yet also go through a well-deserved emotional arc. There are other characters who accompany the protagonists, and all have fantastic vocal performances. The sheer number of characters gives a great deal of variety to the game and fleshes out the world building to an insane degree, which is a testament to the game's lore and writing. And finally, the villains of the game, the Norse gods, Thor and Odin. I love Thor's portrayal in this game. Thanks to superhero media, we've always seen Thor in a handsome and heroic light, so seeing him as a villain is an absolute delight to behold. He's heavy-set and fat, and has a brutish and smug characterization, which makes him a scenery-chewing, campy villain. His arrival in any scene gives immediate dramatic tension. Voiced by the legendary Ryan Hurst from Sons of Anarchy, this is one of the best takes on the well-known god, as well as one of the best game villains in recent memory. And finally, Odin, the big bad of the Norse era of the series. Not much to say here without spoiling, but it's an unexpected portrayal of the character, whose role in the story is far more nuanced than I expected. He serves as a competing father figure for Atreus, which gives him tension with Kratos. Like all good villains, we as the audience can understand and even empathize with his intentions, giving complexity and dramatic stakes to the narrative as a whole. The character work in this game is some of the best I've ever experienced, and it's incredible the level of detail these characters have. Their backstories are actually quite dense, revealed through banter while exploring, and I will be remembering these characters for a long time to come. The 9 realms of Norse mythology have been rendered with jaw-dropping craftsmanship from Santa Monica Studio. This is not just one of the most stunningly beautiful games of the year, but of all time. Throughout the game, the momentum of the gameplay will slow down, forcing you to take in the beauty of your surroundings. This is a risky concept, as lackluster environments would strain the player's retention, but in God of War Ragnarok, it's entirely justified. Not only is taking in sweeping vistas one of the most pleasurable aspects of the game, but it serves the storytelling immensely. While in the perspective of Kratos and Atreus, you can feel the same emotional responses they have to the environments. Early sections of the game take place in the frozen over Midgard, and as our protagonists trudge through snow, walk around icicles, and take in the sights of frozen lakes, you feel that bitter cold right alongside them. Similarly, in an Atreus section, you'll identify with this younger character taking in new worlds for the first time. An important section has Atreus exploring his ancestral home, an autumnal forest littered with huge pieces of giant's jewelry. You'll feel right there in his perspective, being sensorially overloaded just as he is. The environmental beauty serves to heighten the emotional impact of the story, and it's an incredible sensory experience. And I can't end this section without commending Santa Monica Studios' insane effort and craftsmanship in creating these worlds. It feels as though no asset has been copy and pasted, and every object has been placed with authorship and attention to detail. For example, there are a lot of wooden planks in this game which comprise benches, tables, and structures, and yet, at least to my eyes, every single one of these planks looks unique and individually designed. The same can be said about plant life, animals, and other environmental objects and textures. I shudder to think at how many man-hours this took to create and render, and it's an absolute treat to explore these worlds knowing that effort was put in. Something that really ought to be praised when other franchises like Pokemon are putting nowhere near as much effort into creating their environments. Just outstanding stuff. Ragnarok expands upon the formula established in God of War 2018 and adds greater variety and customizability. You'll be doing a lot of combat and exploration, both of which are an absolute joy to behold. This time, Kratos has access to both the Leviathan Axe and Blades of Chaos, as well as his Spartan Rage from the beginning of the game. This might be overwhelming to those who didn't play the last game, but for returning players it's a blessing. Both weapons offer distinct playstyles, with the Leviathan Axe being slower but more powerful, and the Blades of Chaos being faster and covering more area. Swapping between weapons makes it feel like playing as 2 different characters, both of which are fun to master. Both weapons are upgradable throughout the adventure, increasing variety and incentivizing your mastery of them. Spartan Rage turns Kratos into an unstoppable monster, and it's incredibly satisfying punching the shit out of monsters while invincible. Thankfully, it's used sparingly, never makes the game too easy, and is monumentally satisfying to use when backed into a corner. Playing as Kratos solidifies his legacy as one of gaming's most enduring icons. sections. As for Atreus, and I'm sure most other players were nervous that these sections would let the game down. The first time you're forced to play as him, he does indeed feel weak and tough to use. And yet, when returning to play as him, he gets stronger and increasingly more fun to use. Smacking enemies with his magic bow is much faster than using Kratos, offering a distinctly different experience. The gradual increase in strength and being fun to use serves his character arc, synthesizing storytelling and gameplay in a perfect way. While it's a bit of a gaming cliche to use a bow at this point, thanks to games like Zelda, Horizon, and The Last of Us, the way he uses his bow and magical arrows feels like something that's never been done before, a testament to the design qualities of this game. As for the implementation of skill trees, upgrades, and other RPG elements, I'm less enthused by these. I hate too much menu navigation in action games, and this particular menu is a bit overwhelming. The layout is a bit confusing, and the text is a bit too small. After getting used to it, it becomes fine, but as for weapon upgrades, it's not as customizable as you might think. There's a clear progression the designers want you to take here, as armor and abilities are given to you at key moments in the game before another one comes along to replace it, serving that chapter in the story. Perhaps on harder difficulties in New Game Plus it'll make more sense as a customizable experience, as I'm sure the fan community will come up with fun challenges once you can use all upgrades from the beginning of the game. Exploration is similarly mixed, as it has a much slower pace than combat. However, the alternating rhythm of exploration and combat gives the game a perfect pace for me, as having slower sections preceding faster ones gives the game a perfectly paced gameplay loop. And when I say slow, I truly mean it. Not only is Kratos a heavy and slow-moving character, this is another PlayStation squeeze through the cracks in the wall while the next area loads game, in the footsteps of Uncharted, Last of Us, and so on. It's the trade-off for having beautiful environments, as clearly moments where you have to squeeze through a gap, wait for your companion to find a way forward, and so on, are clearly there to mask loading times. This makes sense on the PS4 version which I played, but on the PS5 with its higher processing speed, it makes me wonder how future games will handle this. On one hand, the slower pace makes the game flow nicely, but on the other it's an aspect of gameplay that is on the way out as technology catches up. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this, and it will be interesting to see how future games handle it. Exploration sections have small environmental puzzles that are necessary to progress the game. These usually require you to find the perfect angle to throw your axe, involve hitting switches in a certain order, and so on. These are mostly quite simple, yet provide enough of that puzzle-solving dopamine when you solve them. Frustratingly though, if you're taking a bit too long to figure it out, Mimir or Atreus will just give you the solution. It made me feel stupid for not having solved it fast enough, and it robbed me of that precious dopamine hit. I get that the designers don't want players to get stuck or frustrated by interrupting the pace of the game, but in a game where you have sophisticated combat and menus, it's wholly unnecessary to just give you answers to a simple puzzle. Frustrations aside, the gameplay works perfectly alongside the game's cinematic storytelling. Never has a game felt this cinematic, at least not to me, and God of War Ragnarok's gameplay serves the epic narrative to perfection. I played the PS4 version, as I still can't get a PS5 here in Japan, 2 years after the console's release. The PS5 is still perpetually out of stock. But I've had a look at other people's playthroughs on PS5, and as for that version, it seems to run perfectly. Even on my PS4 version, I had no frame rate dips and performance was mostly consistent throughout. Occasionally there were some textures that took a bit long to load, and there were some weird moments where Atreus just teleported around, but otherwise it was a feast for the eyes. Lighting, textures, resolution, and frame rate worked consistently, and graphics were nothing short of stunning at all times. In the gameplay section, I mentioned the slow pace, and part of the reason for that is the way the game smartly hides its loading times by having your character squeeze through a gap or wait for your companion without the need for a loading screen. As Ragnarok was cross-released between PS4 and PS5, this was a necessity to keep the PS4 version running smoothly. As the PS5 has much faster processing power and does not need to load areas while waiting, I wonder if PS5 players might feel shortchanged by these moments, as they're not taking full advantage of the PS5's power. As the next game in the God of War series will probably be PS5 exclusive, I'm curious as to how Santa Monica Studio will utilize the new hardware. Could we see a faster-paced God of War game with consistent action and instantaneous traversal between stunning environments? It's an interesting question to ponder as we wait for the next installment. Contributing to the cinematic atmosphere of the game, this game's soundtrack is composed by Bear McCreary, best known for his work on TV series The Walking Dead. Considering the composer's background, this is a cinematic orchestral score that resonated emotionally. It underscored the emotional weight of the story perfectly, and gave a brooding and atmospheric feel to the game's environments. It's a very professional soundtrack that pairs well with whatever is happening on the screen. As a result, it's a less gamey soundtrack. It's not that catchy, and it's not something I'll probably ever listen to outside of the game. It only makes make sense while playing the game itself. As an aficionado of video game music, it's not a soundtrack I'll find myself coming back to, as personally I prefer the catchier soundtracks games provide. I won't ever listen to it outside the game, but during the game it's a treat for the ears. The sound design is unsurprisingly perfect, and is on the same level of fidelity as visual assets. I don't know if it's the case, but every sound effect sounds like it was recorded by a Foley team specifically for the game. It adds to the cinematic and handcrafted experience of the whole, as environmental sounds keep you immersed, and combat sounds raise the tension of battle, while also helping you keep track of what's going on. I've already spoken at length on the quality of vocal performances, and I'm similarly amazed at how much effort and work went into performing and recording them. Overall, God of War Ragnarok boasts perfect audio, rivaling that found in big budget movies. I truly feel lucky to live in a time when this game was released. It's nothing short of a masterpiece, and gave me a more emotional experience than any recent movie, TV series, or other piece of media. What I've witnessed here is the eroding of the walls between games and cinema. While still very much a game, God of War Ragnarok uses the language of cinema to tell its story, while still giving a satisfying and engaging gameplay experience. This is a new benchmark for game quality, and I really wonder how other studios will respond. While I've always believed not every game needs an epically told cinematic story to be worthwhile, nor does it need to rouse any other emotion besides just being fun, any future game that attempts an emotional story will be compared to God of War Ragnarok. And considering the insane visual and vocal performance quality here, I feel other game studios will be inspired to increase their quality to this level. While the games industry is forever evolving, God of War Ragnarok's influence will be seen on it in the coming years, and I simply cannot wait to see what's next as we head into an era of next-gen exclusives. So, have you played God of War Ragnarok? Still on the fence despite my repeated singing of its praises? And did you like my makeup in the thumbnail? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and I'll be replying to every one of them. And if you found value in this review, don't forget to drop a like for the algorithm and subscribe to see more gaming reviews in the future. Thanks for listening to me ramble, and I'll see you next time.